Hi, I'm Bill Doherty, and I want to welcome the viewers to another edition of Bill's Bullpen. Bill's Bullpen is a program that's intended to give some information on what's going on both locally and also regionally. And with me today is my dear friend, we worked together as when I was a voting member of the Cape Cod Commission, and she now is the head of the Cape Cod Commission, which is a wonderful thing. Kristy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bill. It is great to be here, and we did work together quite some time ago and really enjoyed that, so I'm pleased to be here today.
Okay, well, in any case, I think that one of the things that viewers might be interested in finding out is sort of giving a brief summary of both the intention and the present activity, important to say the activity with the most priority that's going on today at the Cape Cod Commission.
Those are great questions, and we are extremely busy at the Cape Cod Commission right now. We have been around since 1990, so almost 33 years in existence. We were established by an act of the legislature and with a very broad mission, and kind of simply put, it's to protect those unique qualities that make Cape Cod a special place. So we do that by a variety of different ways. What's rising to the top right now is really addressing some of the challenges that Cape Codders are facing. So we really strive to make sure we maintain a delicate balance between protecting our environment and promoting economic progress on the Cape, and really addressing those critical challenges that so many of our residents are facing, but also making sure that we protect this place that is surrounded by water. We've got over 500 miles of coastline, and making sure that we are aware of those challenges facing the Cape and can provide some protective measures as we move forward with that balance between environment and economy. So we do that through a variety of ways, and we've got a regulatory program and a robust planning program, and so certainly we've been doing that for over 33 plus years, and there's a lot on our plate at the moment.
Okay, well, one of the things that I recognized that when I was active as a county commissioner, I would go to the national conferences, and we were the envy of the whole country because we did have that planning activity that had teeth in it for enforcement, because that's what the regulatory piece does. There was some concern, I remember, in my history, with the Cape Cod Commission, that the regulatory component was overcoming the planning feature, but through a judicious, selection of leaders, we got it back to that balance, and I think that's where we are now. Okay. So what is the main focus of what's going on right now?
It is a balance, and making sure that we can protect the place that is so unique, but at the same time responding to the unique requests and needs of our residents. The main challenges facing the region right now really are related to housing, they're related to climate change, and they're related to water quality and infrastructure. Of course, our housing crisis has been around for a long time. We've been talking about the unique housing challenges that we have here on the Cape for many years. Mm-hmm. COVID certainly exacerbated those issues, and our sales prices are extremely high, higher than our median household incomes, and at the same time, those looking to potentially purchase in the market are, there's no inventory. There's very little inventory. So addressing our housing crisis, not only for those who may want to purchase a home, but also those that may want to rent a home in the region. There's very little inventory available to those that can afford to live and work here on the Cape. So addressing our housing challenges, making sure that we are looking at our coastal resiliency and climate change issues and putting in place measures to really address those challenges that we do have, and at the same time making sure that we've got the appropriate water quality in place, appropriate infrastructure in place to address degraded water quality. And that's not only in our coastal and marine estuaries and embayments, but also in our freshwater ponds as well.
Well, one of the things that I was surprised to find out when I was there was the fact that how much fresh water we actually have on the Cape, and all those kettle ponds. We get our water not from reservoirs but from groundwater. They are very susceptible to being, entrained with pollutants and in particulate matter. And that is of great concern, because in my travels, I remember going to the Southwest and seeing that the amount of the value of having the ability to have several crops a year meant that they had to enrich the land. They enriched the land with nitrogen-loaded fertilizer, and that created a great amount of particulate matter that went into, their water system, which got to the point where when we put a closed air conditioning system, for example, in an estuary, it'll rot out fairly quickly because of the particulate matter and the nature of that combined salt and fresh water. And out there it was doing the same thing. And a more serious problem was the decrease in the availability of potable water. So water is life, and perhaps we don't realize it, that that more let's say wars are fought over the access to water than practically anything else. Now, one of the things that the Cape Cod Commission was responsible for was creating the conference called One Cape, and I was thrilled to be able to go to it. I was also disappointed to realize that we're still talking about the same housing issues that we had. It's especially important because the solution to a lot of the emergency shelter issues that we have now are related to the availability of housing. What are some of the steps that the Cape Cod Commission is trying to come up with in their comprehensive plan with regard to this issue?
Well, we were very pleased to have you at our One Cape Summit this year.
And you made sure that I have to tell you, I felt so welcome because I haven't been at the county level for some time. It was like, they remember me. They really did.
No, it was wonderful to have you there. It was wonderful to see all the stakeholders in the same room, really discussing the same issues. And some of these issues aren't new, and we've been talking about them for a while, and they're impacting the Cape, and the COVID-19 pandemic certainly made those challenges even more. And we're putting new strategies in place now to address some of these challenges. And one of the benefits of One Cape is that we have the opportunity really to bring in speakers from outside of our region to hear what some of the other communities across not only the state but even beyond that. We had speakers coming in from the western part of the country really sharing some of the models that are working out there. The Commission is currently underway with a regional housing strategy for Cape Cod so that we can put together a strategies of options, a menu of options really that communities can choose from. 83% of the homes on the Cape are single-family homes. And so we have really a lack of different types of housing. And so not everybody is in the category where they can afford a single-family home or even want a single-family home. So making sure that we can really address those missing middle housing types that can be more affordable, can be smaller size, can be at a scale that maybe some of our younger residents or even our older residents may choose to live in. The other challenge that we have here on the Cape is that we've got a significant number of second homes. Nearly 37% of the Cape is second homes. And so that really doesn't help with the availability of the market for potential rentals or potential year-round housing for some of our residents that really need to secure that housing so that they can continue to work on the Cape. So a lot of our strategies now as we're putting together this regional plan are working with stakeholders, finding out what the community needs are and how can we put some of these strategies into the hands of our elected leadership across the region and of the people that need to make these decisions in order to put some of these strategies into place.
So this 100-mile peninsula, that we have, because technically the Cape is only the little corner, at the end of this, what I'd call entry-level workers at municipalities. Okay. Bourne is facing an issue where the police, they've recently had to extend the distance that somebody could live in order to work here to 30 miles. Now, as we go down the peninsula, that becomes even greater. 60. One of the statistics that I heard at One Cape was that 60% of the workforce on the Cape comes over the bridge. And by the way, when I went back and forth over the bridge this week, it was awful because it took me an hour and a half to get down from where was I? Up in Boston, and then it took me about an hour to get from 3 miles away from the bridge over the bridge, and then I had to go to a meeting the next day later that afternoon, and it took me another 40 minutes to get over. Now, aging infrastructure and all of that, and those of us who have worked in transportation issues understand that, hey Judy, we've got a shovel, we're going to build a new road, and then it starts, and it's 8 years between the time that the concept was thought about and a shovel is put in the ground to start the thing going. And you say, well, why is that? That's the way it was. I was deeply disturbed when they had this shovel-ready business, I think under the Obama administration, when we realized that if we had some more money and some of the things that were ongoing, we perhaps could, accelerate the pace of completion. But that was, how shall I say, people making political decisions on without an understanding, what the practical impact was. But in any case, so we know that 60% of the workforce is coming over the bridge, but then we have these other statistics that that came from one Cape, which was really interesting, which was let's say dwelling unit occupancy. Okay, back in the 50s, when I got married, and it was starting out, the intention was you got to a starter home. And you started having children. As you had children and your job prospects improved, you moved to a bigger house. Here, one of the I don't remember the exact percentage, was that a lot of homes, a lot of apartments were being occupied by one person. Okay, and then the next larger group were couples that were cohabiting, but not starting, not doing family formations as far as having children.
Right.
Because part of that, is that because people are getting more of an education, you might say there was an Irish tradition that women didn't get married until they were, close to the edge of leaving childbirth. In that way, the population, was down to a manageable level. But with education, you're in school a longer period of time, so that means that you're not forming that. So the next question is, how do we, as a culture, and as let's say as a planning responsibility, how do we matriculate through all of these different issues and coordinate it into what I would call a reasonable plan?
You raise a lot of really interesting and great points. And to go back to your conversation around who's actually living in some of these larger homes, we are finding that they are perhaps two people living in a home that maybe we're saying is potentially underutilized. So is there an opportunity to look at new methods to occupying those homes? I've heard some people say we don't have a housing problem, we have an occupancy problem. And so are there opportunities to make those homes into something that could be open to more than two people? And so a lot of the conversation is around these accessory dwelling units and additional spaces within homes that could potentially house some of our working families or others. And so certainly I think there are going to be other opportunities there. How do we put it all in a regional plan, I think, is part of what our job is at the commission.
Oh, yeah. Of course it is.
And so balancing all of these different interests and making sure that not only we're looking at climate considerations when we're looking at housing, we're looking at net zero design potentially, and we're looking at floodplain considerations and looking at where potentially structures could be in harm's way should we continue to experience some of the extreme storms and extreme sea level rise and potential storm surges that we are seeing and experiencing. So making sure we balance all of those different things while making it possible for those who already live on the Cape or already work on the Cape to potentially live on the Cape. So that's it's a delicate balance, and there's a lot of work to be done there. But the best way to do that is really with outreach to the communities and working with stakeholders and working with different groups across the region, like we had at One Cape, to make sure that we're all at least on the same page when it comes time to putting some of these plans in place. We only have 86% of the land across the Cape is either already developed or already protected. So we need to be responsible in how we move forward and growing as a community. We know we need to continue to grow as a region, but how we do that and where we do that becomes the most important and critical questions. So one of our focus areas as we look at the housing strategy is really around redevelopment and how can we identify those areas that are inactivity centers that can provide for more of that missing middle housing, those mixed use buildings buildings that can accommodate that residential component with a vibrant walkable downtown. So building on the historic character that we have and adding more of that.
Okay.
So
The walkable downtown was always there's a Currier and Ives print, of course, but the problem with walkable downtowns is I recall when I was more engaged with it, was that you had to drive to get downtown, okay, and then you could sort of preambulate around.
Yeah.
But one of the development issues that I thought was not really supported as well as it should be was the shop, was the house over the shop.
Yep.
Okay, and taking a look at looking at when you talk about redevelopment, how much support have you seen for what I'd call the kind of development that would go up rather than out, and then taking a look at what I'd call some of the more restrictive rules with regard to parking, because the Commonwealth had come out with a policy of supporting development next to public transportation, which I thought was very intelligent. But the problem here, was there 220,000 now that all the year round?
Yes.
Okay, so
230.
yes. Oh, we've gone up 10 times.
We'll close, yeah.
Oh, we're moving up. Okay. So looking at that population, which is the size of a small city, but it's spread out over 100 miles. Okay, so we have a focus on our main population centers, Barnstable, Falmouth, Yarmouth, and I think the SMSA included Dennis, Yarmouth. As far as how it's being reported. What progress has been made in, let's say, in that redevelopment of properties?
So it's a challenging conversation, because as soon as you start talking about height and you start talking about density and potentially adding units top of the shop housing, as you're talking about, it often becomes about how many stories and what is the density in terms of the number of units per acre. But what we found is when we turn the conversation to really look at design, you can accommodate a lot of units per acre, and it doesn't necessarily have to have the look and feel of the urban areas that you're typically used to seeing when you think of density. So it really is a public perception, and it really is that design component that's important to be able to overcome. And so a lot of our work has been with stakeholders and having different types of design charrettes and doing design surveys to get an understanding of what might be acceptable in certain communities. What might be acceptable in Falmouth or Barnstable may not be the same thing that's going to be acceptable to the community in other areas across the Cape, say Orleans or Chatham. So I think a lot of those conversations need to continue to be localized. But we are making some progress there and seeing areas that can potentially be redeveloped and areas that can accommodate additional density because they've got the infrastructure in place. They have wastewater infrastructure in place. They're protecting their water quality from those different nutrients that are coming from septic systems or other areas that are a lot of that we're seeing for the impacts in our marine estuaries and abatements in our fresh water. So we are making some progress there. I think there's still a lot more to be done in terms of making sure that our communities are going to be accepting of additional density in some of these more walkable areas. We are still a region that's very reliant on the single occupancy vehicle, and making that a less of a focus and identifying areas that are really appropriate for not only living but working and recreating. Those village centers are going to be important as we kind of move forward in planning as a region.
I'm intrigued by your comment about making better use of the acreage that we have, because one of the presenters at One Cape was talking about taking an acreage and also looking at the contribution it made to the tax base, that instead of having one house on, let's say, on an acre of land, you could actually put several smaller houses on it. And in terms of perception, since we had been a cottage colony, many of these would look like cottages, and perhaps perhaps be more successful in terms of being accepted into what's going on. So there's that, and of course I'm a big proponent of garden apartments, because to me an apartment that let's say will allow you to would allow you to have open space around it, but yet provide a more successful solution for for decent housing, it's something that that really makes sense to me. Yeah. I want you to talk a little bit about water quality safety, because we've discovered that there's an awful lot of private wells on the Cape. I remember we used to put in test wells on the Lower Cape because of in training, and of course we have this perpetual thing going on at Joint Base Cape Cod. I wonder if that'll ever get over, where we take all of the dirt out of the out, and then we sterilize it and put it back in. So what kind of recommendations is the Cape Cod Commission looking at in terms of the management and protection of private well safety?
That's a great question. And so a lot of our focus at the Commission has been on our marine estuaries and embayments, looking at nitrogen impacts from primarily on-site septic systems with a few other contributing factors and sources. We're making significant progress there in getting wastewater projects funded and implemented across the Cape, with the identification of the Water Protection Fund that our delegation really supported and the administration supported. We've been able to put millions of dollars back into wastewater projects on the Cape. So we're making a lot of progress there. Still a lot of work to be done. And we're also at the same time now taking a really hard look at our freshwater lakes and ponds across the region. We have almost 900 freshwater lakes and ponds. Not all of those are necessarily degraded, but there are significant impacts we're seeing from phosphorus and fertilizers and other types of nutrient contaminants that are causing harmful algal blooms and other factors to degradation in those lakes and ponds. So we're putting some strategies together there. And at the same time, we have a sole source aquifer, and making sure that we protect our drinking water, protect these really unique and valuable resources for the Cape are critical. So certainly we are testing the different water and making sure that we're compiling all the different water sampling areas across the Cape from our not only our freshwater, but certainly our marine water quality as well. And we've identified many of the public water supply wells that are existing on the Outer Cape primarily, and certainly in other areas as well, those private waters, and making sure that the public water supplies are where we need them to be. So there's a lot of effort there, and a lot of it needs to continue to be coordinated, not only at the Commission level, working with the county, working with municipalities, and working with the state. So I think there are a lot of people that really understand the criticality of the issue and protecting our unique water resources that we have, because that really not only drives our healthy environment, but it drives a healthy economy.
Well, part of my immediate concern is there was an article in the paper today about the paucity of voluntary testing of private well sources, and I certainly intend to bring that up, at a future Board of Health meeting here in Bourne. Now, we haven't talked about climate change, or there's several different nomenclature words that they use for it. What is the most popular word for this problem now?
I think it's still being called climate change as the major issue that we have here, but it's kind of more along the lines of the strategies that are being implemented. Are we looking at mitigation strategies, or are we looking at more strategies that have to do with resilience? And so we're really kind of identifying both areas that need to be a focus. About a year and a half ago, we had the opportunity to put together the first ever climate action plan for Cape Cod. So we now have a plan that covers the entire jurisdiction of Cape Cod to address climate change. And so we're really looking at it in terms of a multitude of strategies that can be implemented by a resident, by a community, even a municipality, and even going beyond that.
Now, in terms of what you've identified, getting back to the private well situation, personally, when I hear about there's a certain amount of sodium content in a well that meets an acceptable level, that bothers me a lot, because anytime I do understand the difference between so-called hungry water, distilled water that's looking for minerals in order to, in order to entrain it. But I also feel as though people need to take some more responsibility of finding out more about what represents a safe water source, as well as what they can do to actually contribute to climate change let's say, solutions. At this point, does the Cape Cod Commission have any suggestions?
We have a menu of options that are on our website, and you can
On our
actually...
website. And how would somebody get to that website?
It's capecodcommission.org, and then if you navigate to our climate page, we have a lot of resources. So resources for residents, resources for different boards across the region, communities, and other groups and organizations, some business organizations, nonprofits, that they can really sort and filter through the strategies that we've identified and really understand what they can do to start making an impact or continue making an impact to address climate change. Primary sources of greenhouse gas emissions on the Cape are, not surprisingly, vehicles and our built environment, our structures on the Cape. And so making sure that we put together measures to address that. That's not to say everyone needs to go out and buy an electric vehicle, but certainly there are strategies that people can take to make sure that they are helping or contributing to reducing those greenhouse gas emissions that we have on the Cape, so that we can really start making an impact on our climate challenges that we have here. We're partnering with the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative, which is a nonprofit organization on the Cape, with many different organizations that are part of its board of directors and advisors, and they're really going to be working closely with us to make sure that a lot of the pieces within that climate action plan get implemented. So I think we'll have a pretty broad reach in terms of working with the communities. We're also seeing a lot of our communities taking action at the local level, and so putting together their own local climate action plans as well. So we're supportive of those efforts. We want to see that more grassroots, granular level of action taking place. And we're hopeful that the next regional climate action plan that we may put out in several years from now will have made at least a small dent in addressing our greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, I've always believed that the Cape Cod Commission had those three elements of communication, collaboration, and coordination. The coordination piece was always one that depended upon the cooperation of let's say of the rest of the region, all 15 towns. I've come to see what a wonderful contribution that the Cape Cod Commission has made. I remember that I had certain reservations before I joined the Cape Cod Commission, then I got co-opted. But so as we come to the end of this, is there any particular takeaway you would want to leave folks with about how they can not only participate, but become more aware of what the Cape Cod Commission is doing to contribute to their life?
Yes, definitely. And we would love for more stakeholders and more interested citizens to become part of our planning processes. We have a regional policy plan, we have an economic development strategy, a regional transportation plan, a climate plan, many other plans, and these are regional plans that we develop with community input. And there are better plans because we have community input, and we have those local decision makers, those local actors really providing their feedback on different types of strategies and what they want to see in their communities. And that's the best way to really make an impact on some of the regional planning that happens here in the region. Getting your voice heard in some of these areas is probably the most critical piece of it, and we encourage and really want to make sure we continue to engage with the community. So we would love more participation.
Okay, and the way to participate is, of course, to go to the webpage.
Yes.
Okay, and another way is to actually, I guess you could write snail mail if you could find a stamp in the post office. But the most important thing is to pay attention. Okay, and so with that, Kristy Senatori, you've been wonderful. I've really enjoyed, meeting up with you again. And as I said, the Cape Cod Commission continues to do great stuff for all of us here in Cape Cod, and thank you very much for that. And I want to thank the viewers for taking the time to find out more about what's going on, because this is probably one of the most important pieces that keeps Cape Cod, Cape Cod. So with that, I want to thank you very much for watching. Thank you for coming. And you've been watching. This has been a production of Born TV.